I just want to alert you of the fact that you're on camera, so we're recording this event. So if you say something, it will be filmed. I just want you to be aware of that, given the situation in Malaysia, right? So maybe we'll have a couple of questions.
Hello, PJ Thum from the University of Oxford, and as a Singaporean, I'd love to know what Singapore knows. What's the Singapore angle to all this? And I also just saw your slide just now that Singapore knows lots about it. So please, love to know about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, PJ. Nice to see you again. I think we know that Singapore knows everything. Most of this went through Singapore. One of the first hints I got that the regulators were taking action rather than trying to just ignore this story was when we heard that Singapore had frozen 6 major bank accounts. And I heard through the grapevine that these bank accounts were particularly at BSI. Of course, they were also at Falcon. That money that went into Najib's account had gone. Najib's account had gone from. It had gone from Goldman Sachs through New York Mellon, through a few little funds, and then into Tanall Finance. Which was an account at Falcon Bank. And of course, when I heard that, it was just another of those big bell moments, because you look up Falcon Bank, it's owned by a bar. And the chairman was none other than Mohammed Hosseini al-Badawi. So the tags are all there. The red flags were all there, really, for the regulators to pick up on. The other big source of income was this company Blackstone, which you see again there, Blackstone Real Estate Partners. Now that's Standard Chartered Bank, again based in Singapore. And of course, the other central bank in all this was BSI. And it was a Singapore bank, as you well know, because we've seen the whole of the last 3 weeks has been devoted to the first trials related to 1MDB, which have taken place in Singapore and have involved the key bankers for Joe Low. And it's been very interesting for those who've been following that trial to see it all come out. And they're all admitting that they were working for Joe Low, that he was the biggest customer of the bank, that he represented 1MDB, SRC, and all the rest, and they would just do, and he had these very important, powerful clients. Singapore have been taking their time. Najib has spent an awful lot of time in Singapore over the last few months, having high-level discussions, and I think we all know, and I think he's trying to put on the pressure with his neighbour, obviously, to slow down as much as possible the investigation into 1MDB. They know everything. And we'll have to see. I was warned by American regulators that these particular investigations take a very long time because they have to do it properly. If they're going to do it, they have to do it absolutely properly, by the book, which I guess is what they've been doing, and what they did also say is, but my goodness, when we get going, we're lethal. So I hope that they will carry on doggedly, relentlessly unpicking this enormous scandal. But it's coming out to us slowly.
Okay, we have a question right there in the middle. The gentleman with the glasses.
Thank you. Given your remarkable exposés, one, how do you respond to the alleged thieving by the one Raja of Sarawak and very little criminal actions being taken against him? Two, has kleptocracy become part and parcel and poisoned the soul of Malaysian politics? And three, now that Trump has come to power, whose own whose own financial probity there's a big question mark over it. Do you think MO1 will escape the long arm of the law? Thank you.
I think these multiple questions are made for people with better brains than me. I'll try the Trump one first, because we've all been having fun listening to Najib, who told Cabinet last week, apparently, that Trump's his new golfing, best pal, as usual, and with Trump in, he's going to get off the hook. No worries, folks. I think anyone who's so confident, I think if he was confident that he would get off the hook thanks to his alleged friendship with Trump, he wouldn't brag about it, would he? It of course is an immense imponderable. In fact, I have a view that the likes of Trump and these very, unexpected election results are in very large part owing to a sense amongst people globally that the thieves are taken over in the kitchen, and actually, it's a rebellion against that sense of kleptocracy thriving and not being reined in, and spreading corrupt practices throughout our banking systems that have caused these shock upsets because people felt that mass diversions of money were not being dealt with. And that's a genuine concern. And one of the fascinating aspects of this little story of little Sarawak and its tragic situation being bled to death by that multi-billionaire who was taking all its money was that there would have been no point in doing it if there hadn't been a global financial system that was willing to help him get the money out, so he could spend it where he wanted to spend it, which wasn't Kuching. It was New York and London, where he has huge amounts of property, Adelaide, Australia. The global financial system was there for him with those nice little dark pools of offshore places where he could hide the money, avoid tax, avoid being identified as the owner of the money. And of course that's what all these guys were doing. It was affecting everyone, not just Sarawak. It's affected all of us. Escalating property prices in central London, for example, and the fact that none of these people are paying tax. Huge amounts of money are going into very smaller and smaller elites who are avoiding taxation, regulation. They're avoiding governance that we all have to abide by. So I think it all comes together, and if Trump wants to drain the swamp, I suggest he starts with Malaysia.
There were two more questions. Do you want?
Oh yes. Well, I mentioned Taiwan kleptocracy.
Okay. Please.
Hi, I have two questions as well. The first one is that whether you think that the continued focus and with this one MDB investigation will galvanize Malaysian citizens in general to focus on the politics of good governance as opposed to in the past, racial divides and so on. So, and how that would affect the future of Malaysia post 1MDB. Secondly, just a very pragmatic question. What happens to money that gets frozen by governments abroad, seeing that these are money that Malaysian taxpayers have contributed towards all their working lives? Thank you.
Yes, I wouldn't do something, if it was completely hopeless. And in fact, it's been incredibly inspiring covering this story for the very point you've made. I just love reading the comments, not just on my stories, but on all the stories relating to this issue in Malaysia. You compare the comments, by ordinary citizens writing in Malaysia to, our newspaper comments. They're so thoughtful. They are thinking about big democratic themes. They talk about, divisions of power and, the need for, checks and balances, independence of the judiciary. People in Malaysia are thinking in the way we don't bother, because we just take it all for granted. And it's been really, really interesting seeing that, growing understanding. Even to see Dr. Mahathir come out and say that, there is need in Malaysia for more independent media, Great, so even he worked it out. And I do think there has been an evolution, there's been a democratic consciousness that has definitely evolved over this. And yes, you mentioned, the constant harping on, and I shouldn't say that, but about race and religious differences, which do understandably, ride high in a society like Malaysia, where people have to mix together because they come from different backgrounds, and it has kind of paralysed thinking, and you have political parties that are just based on race and all these issues, and it's really great, particularly to see young people starting to think beyond those traditional divides together, cross race, cross religion, to those universal principles that will decide in the end whether this is going to you're going to come out with an informed democracy, a democratic base in Malaysia that can move forward, which is possible. There's a terrific thinking, professional, educated class in Malaysia, and there's hope for the country. Or whether Najib's going to crack down so badly, divide you all as he's doing his darndest at the moment, whipping up tensions, whipping up religious issues, for his own, his view, his own political survival. And I very much hope that, that this will win through, and we're seeing the march this weekend, which is based on democratic principles, protecting democratic principles. The money, I often get asked about the money. Even people, I've been talking to people, sort of, for example, from Switzerland. They've frozen quite a lot of bank accounts, and they're starting to say, look, we're going to have to give it back at some stage. We may be in a situation where we have to give this back to Najib. So all I can say is, it is your money. There are lots of well-intentioned international regulatory bodies sitting on the money. I suggest you change your government so you've got a better chance of it going back to someone who isn't a crook.
Yeah, question over there.
Yeah, thank you. So just picking up on this democratic awakening that you've just mentioned and this march this weekend, I was wondering if there has been, if there is, if you think there will be any kind of movement from just commenting on the web into a more kind of practical, real-world activism, social movement, and what that will or might look like.
There's no doubt that there is a genuine fear amongst Malaysians. Malaysians are generally very gentle, sweet people. They don't like violence and aggression. But there is a great deal of threat at the moment hanging over people. There's a thuggish group of people, as everybody knows, the red shirts, who are going to be deployed this weekend. The people are really frightened of going out. Now, we have these sort of annual picnics in a way, which are the birthday marches. It's not the way we all, we'd all be out there, wouldn't we, on day one. In Malaysia, if you decide to take a placard and go out onto the street, you're going to get into terrible trouble with the police. They pretend that they are democratic in Malaysia. They are not. They have numerous arbitrary laws under which anyone who speaks out publicly can be hammered. As I say, there's also a physical threat now as well. And it goes beyond that. I mean, students will be told here in London, if they come to an event like this, they'll be watched, clocked, and they could lose their grant. Those tactics, and certainly appearing on a birthday march, those tactics are used without shame by the Malaysians, always. Birthday, every time there's a birthday march, the students around the world are told that their grants are at risk if they attend the local ones in whichever country they're studying. And the same goes for people who have jobs. Many Malaysians in particular have Malays. I mean, have government-related jobs that could be affected, and they're threatened. If you're a teacher or a civil servant, you go on that march. We've made it illegal, and you could lose your job. And so, that's why I think there's so little civil activism.
There's a question from a young woman over there.
Hi, so I wanted to ask, because so far a lot of people have actually said that Najib is pretty much quite like a Teflon Prime Minister. So despite all the scandal they are talking about, a few billions that went missing, but apparently it sort of slided off him, and that he's managed to stay in power because there's like this core group of UMNO leadership that's sort of supporting him. So I was just wondering, based on your little birds who might be telling you, has there been somewhat like a shift in sentiments within UMNO leadership who has been supporting him, particularly in light of the recent Chinese investments that Najib has been courting? I've heard that some of them got quite unhappy, but I'm not very sure, so I was wondering what your opinions about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a lot of people who are worried about this sudden sort of swivel, as one MDB goes geopolitical, and Najib swivels from the US to China. He domestically he's been feeling up against the minority population of Chinese. He's been allowing and paying for very aggressive pro-Malay activists like Ali Tinju and all the Red Shirt Brigade, and playing that domestic card, and yet and it's very difficult to do that against your own Chinese population, and then go over to the superpower on your border and start courting this giant power into your political life. And of course, I think there's a great deal of worry because, of course, what he's really doing with the Chinese is accepting a bailout. We all know how corrupt that major contract that he has now initiated with China. For he's basically a railway line that should cost 30 billion ringgit is costing. Is it 90 billion ringgit? And of course, I happened to get leaked the the detail on that, which I published, which shows that actually they'd written into the darn contract paying off the 1MDB debts. And there was consternation when I published it, and they sat on it for a few weeks.
Is this the actual contract?
Yeah.
The actual contract that you saw?
I've got a copy. It's on my site. Someone leaked it to me. And it's blatant, and really the Chinese have to think about really. The CCCC, the firm concerned, has been banned by the World Bank from contracts because of its track record, actually in bribing for tenders. But this is all backed by a soft loan from China. And the idea is that he's going to be able to hide his debts from 1MDB in this railway line. And Tony Poir, who's been an absolute champion, as you all know, on this whole issue, has been having enormous fun the last couple of days. Sort of comparing the cost per kilometre of this East Coast rail line, which is just a fraction less per kilometre than the subalp tunnel that's been drilled in Switzerland. It's the most expensive railway in the world, obviously commissioned without tendering as usual, so there are so many question marks over that Chinese rate, and of course he's riding too many horses, so I think he is going to, the Americans are not going to be delighted, so he's trying to sort of re-court Trump. He's trying to get in with the Chinese, and of course, there's this very worrying initiative with the extremist Muslim agenda, which is upsetting many people within his own party who don't want to see hudud law and beatings and amputations introduced to Malaysia. So he's worrying his own people in many ways, yes, he does have them under his thumb. And the Teflon point, I don't know if it's Teflon. I think everybody knows he's dirty. The question is, how long are the people that keep him in power? Because power was allowed to become concentrated so severely in Malaysia, as the democracy basically degenerated, owing to a one-party rule for 60 years. They just kept centralising the power and then centralising it under the Prime Minister because, they never changed hands, power never changed hands. And so it's an effective dictatorship. It is a dictatorship, effectively, because they won't even allow, the opposition to win. They just bulldoze through those elections. So the people around him are extremely worried. They're hanging around, he's handing them money every month. And, they'll jump when they have to. That's what I'm told anyway.
We have time for a couple of questions, yeah?
Hi Claire, first of all I wanted to thank you for your relentless releases of information. I'm a former Malaysian. I live in Canada right now, and so I want to thank you for this quest for truth. And I just wanted to know if you are aware of some of the other whistleblowers, because 1MBD is only the tip of the iceberg. There's been Felder Global Ventures, 40 billion from the EPF, Lembaga Tabung Haji. I think my estimate is almost 200 billion that Najib has stolen from the Malaysians.
Yes, I am aware. Was that the end of the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. No. And thank you for bringing that up. I mean, 1MDB is such a huge topic of its own, and I didn't get to the end of what I was hoping to say on that. So, but absolutely, you are entirely right, and I think this is what people on the inside, people in the know, and why people like the formidable Dr. Mahathir have been coming out so strongly, because this looting is certainly not confined to 1MDB. And the Lembaga, what's the full name of the... Yeah. Oh, Tabung Haji I have covered. The other fund, as you say, there has been absolute full-scale looting. I have covered where I can. When you're trying to do an investigation or a story, sometimes when there's a massive problem, actually, you just need to get a handle on what you can absolutely 100% slam dunk prove and throw that at them. We all know it's worse than that. We do, but you have to get a lever on what is absolutely concrete, and 1MDB has become that.
You had a question. Yeah.
My first question is, any crime needs a motive. Who needs these billions of dollars?
Right, I'm going to admit, I feel slightly sorry for Najib, because he was due. Well, I don't really, because of the things he's done, but he was due to lose 2013. After 60 years of continuous rule by BN, it was almost, if the democratic process had been allowed to take the slightest normal course, of course, at some stage BN was going to have to lose an election. Well, Najib didn't want to be the one, his dad had been Prime Minister, his uncle had been Prime Minister. He'd been, he'd really been lobbying for that job for a very long time. And he'd learnt at the knee of, the world's most corrupt party, UMNO, so he knew all the dirty tricks. He was darned if he was going to get into power and then have to, lose an election in a couple of years after that. So his absolute first priority when he got into power, the 1MDB scam was about funding, the 2013 election. And he needed a massive money to win it, he reckoned, because come to the worst, he could just throw money at this election. So that was the motive. Of course, he's got a very greedy wife who took a lot of it for Hermes handbags and anti-aging treatments, and she'll have to, you could sue the doctor, couldn't you? She, and they've thrown that money around personally. But it was about winning the election. Something very interesting, actually. I mean, he took in that extra 700 million into his bank account. He went up to over $1 billion just before the election. So he was just taking in another 700 million that March before he called the election. He feared he might lose. They gerrymandered and they threw money at it, but he was worried he would lose, even so. And so he needed the real money in case he needed to buy over opposition MPs after the election. He was relieved he didn't have to do that, and he shipped 620 million back out and closed down the account after the election to Singapore, where it went to that Tanor account again. Singaporeans, I think, have frozen some of that.
Okay, maybe one last question. All right, there's plenty more. Maybe, right behind you.
Hi Claire. As a young Malaysian working and living in the UK, hearing scandals like this is incredibly disheartening, and it can, push away any idea of wanting to go home and make a difference and a positive change. So my question is, what would be your word of advice to the Malaysian youth who are left feeling powerless and incredibly disenfranchised?
Well, I think one of the worst things that's happened to Malaysia has been this brain drain of disenchanted young people. The cleverest go, and that leaves behind the most vulnerable. I would say if you wanted to do something for your country, your duty is to go back. I think it's also quite telling that Najib has started to dramatically slash funding for foreign students, particularly to places like the UK, because they're the pesky ones that come back with all these sort of kind of senses of self-entitlement, big gobs and democratic attitudes. He's sending them all off to get a religious education in Egypt and Saudi Arabia at the moment, which is affecting the way things used to be done in Malaysia. So please go back. I can't.
Work in the environment sector, not politicians.
Maybe we ended on that note. Just to inform you, we have these events once a week. We talk about Indonesia next week, political corruption in Indonesia. So you're all invited to attend, and please join me one more time to thank Claire for